I never imagined I'd be a single father. It wasn't something I planned for or even feared. I truly believed I had built a life with a woman who was in it for the long haul. Isabella and I had history. High school sweethearts, we survived young. Love and, against all odds, made it to marriage. It felt like something out of a romantic movie, two people choosing each other despite the chaos of the world. We didn't have much, but we had love. Or at least I thought we did. She was fire, and I was the steady ground beneath her. We balanced each other until we didn't. When Isabella wanted something, she got it. It started small. Designer, handbags, perfumes, extravagant shoes, but soon spiraled. I worked harder, picking up extra shifts to provide. She deserved nice things, didn't she? That's what I told myself. But the bills piled up, rent was barely covered, and credit card statements felt suffocating. Whenever I confronted her, she always had an excuse. I just want to keep up with the other moms. Our kids deserve more than just surviving. You don't understand how much appearances matter. But I did understand. I understood that every time she swiped my card for things we couldn't afford, I lost a little more control over my own life. Then one night I woke up to emptiness. The spot beside me in bed was cold. At first I thought she was in the bathroom, but the eerie silence told me otherwise. Then I saw it. A folded letter on her pillow. You were holding me back from my dreams. My heart pounded as I read the words over and over. I need to explore the world, and I found someone who wants to do it with me. I'll be back in a few years. We can pick up where we left off. That last line almost made me laugh, as if our marriage was a paused TV show, as if my life, our children's lives, could wait while she ran off into the sunset. I called her, voicemail, again, and again. I walked through the house. Half her closet was gone, her vanity wiped clean. She hadn't just left. She had planned this. And worst of all, she hadn't even said goodbye to Noah and Ava. The next morning, I made breakfast like any other day. But when Noah asked, "Where's Mommy?" I froze. Ava, too young to understand, frowned. Noah, sharper, clenched his fists. Did she say goodbye? I shook my head. Noah pushed his plate away. Then she's not coming back. He stormed off before I could say anything. That night, I heard him crying in his room. Ava whispered to her stuffed bear, asking why Mommy wasn't home. And I sat in the hallway, my head in my hands, feeling helpless. I should have seen the signs, the restlessness, the overspending, the dissatisfaction. But I never imagined she'd actually do it. But she did. The first weeks were a blur. I moved through them on autopilot, caught between anger, betrayal, and disbelief. But I had 2 kids depending on me, and no matter how shattered I felt, I had to be their father first. Money was tight, but suddenly it stretched further. No more reckless spending. I refinanced the mortgage, cut unnecessary expenses, and for the first time, I had control. Parenting alone was harder. I forgot Noah's soccer practice, packed Ava a peanut butter sandwich, only to remember her school had a no-nut policy. But I learned. I found a rhythm, and slowly, I became present. One night, I found Noah's notebook, open on the kitchen table. Mom left, but Dad stayed. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't perfect, but I was showing up. And for my kids, that was enough. Letting go of Isabella was the hardest part. I held on to hope that she'd at least check in for the kids. But she never did. No phone calls, no birthday cards, nothing. Over time, the kids stopped asking. Eventually, I filed for divorce. She had abandoned us, and after a year with no contact, the process was easy. The papers arrived, and just like that, our marriage was officially over. And I felt nothing. I sold the house, the ghost of our past. Moved the kids to Ridgewood Falls, a quiet lakeside town Isabella had always hated. We found a cozy cabin, nothing extravagant. But for the first time in years, I felt free. The kids were thriving. Noah joined soccer. Ava adjusted. Life felt normal. Then one Saturday morning, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, I heard footsteps on the trail. I looked up, and my stomach dropped. It was her. Isabella stood at the edge of my porch, dressed in designer clothes, hair perfectly styled, the same confident smirk on her lips, like she had never left. "Hello, darling," she purred, sliding off her sunglasses. I didn't respond. She smiled. "I'm back, as promised." As promised? Something inside me twisted. 6 years. 6 years without a single word. 6 years of me raising our children alone. 6 years of my son resenting her and my daughter, forgetting what her mother's voice even sounded like. And now she stood here, expecting to walk back in like nothing had happened. She had no idea. No idea who I had become. No idea that we had moved on. And absolutely no idea that this time, I was the one closing the door. I folded my arms, keeping my voice calm. "What are you doing here, Isabella?" She blinked, surprised by my lack of enthusiasm, as if she had expected me to pull her into my arms. Sighing, she said playfully, "I said I'd come back. Here I am." I shook my head. This wasn't an apology. This wasn't regret. This was entitlement. Before I could respond, the door creaked open behind me. My son Noah stepped onto the porch. He was 12 now, taller, more grown up than the last time she had seen him. His face was unreadable, but there was hardness in his eyes. "Noah, my boy! Look how much you've grown!" Isabella stretched her arms out, waiting for him to run to her. He didn't. Instead, he took a step back, fists clenched. "What are you doing here?" His voice was steady, but anger simmered beneath it. Isabella frowned, as if the idea of him not welcoming her back had never crossed her mind. "Noah, sweetheart, I know it's been a long time, but you can't just come back and pretend nothing happened." His voice cracked, 6 years of resentment pouring out. Isabella flinched, but quickly forced a regretful smile. "I know I made mistakes, but I needed to find myself. Now that I'm back, we can be a family again." That word, family, made something inside me snap. Before I could respond, Noah turned and ran inside, slamming the door. Isabella sighed dramatically. "He's just upset. He'll come around." I let out a bitter laugh. "You really think it's that simple?" She tilted her head. "I don't see why it has to be complicated. I'm back. We can fix things." I shook my head. "You walked out on your kids, Isabella. You think you can just show up and pick up where you left off? I'm still their mother. You stopped being their mother the night you left them." Her expression faltered. "That's not fair." "Fair? Fair would have been staying and fighting for your family instead of running off with some guy who could take you on vacations." Her lips pressed together. I saw the flash of guilt, but also pride. She wasn't here because she regretted leaving. She was here because she thought she could take back what she abandoned. The door creaked again. Ava stepped outside, cautious. She had been too young to remember much of Isabella, but some part of her still held on to the idea of a mother. "Are you staying?" she asked. Isabella smiled. "Of course, baby. We're a family." Ava looked at me for an answer. "No," I said firmly. "She's leaving." Isabella's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me? You're not part of this family anymore. We moved on. We're happy, and I'm not letting you waltz back in and undo everything we built." She scoffed. "You don't get to make that decision." "Actually, I do. I divorced you 5 years ago." Silence. The words hit her. Her expression hardened. "You sold our house, didn't you?" I smiled. "Yes." She stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. "Where's the money?" I laughed. "There it is. The real reason you're here." She bristled. "I sacrificed so much for this family." I held up a hand. Don't talk to me about sacrifice. Ava spoke softly. Daddy, is she leaving? I turned to my daughter. Yes, sweetheart. Ava nodded, stepping closer to me. Isabella broke. Real. Tears this time. Please, she whispered. I just want to fix things. I took a deep breath. You can't. She swallowed hard, realizing she had lost. Without another word, she turned and walked away. This time, she didn't look back. That night, Noah sat beside me on the porch. She's not gone, is she? I sighed. No, buddy, she's not. She's going to try something, isn't she? I nodded. Probably. He clenched his jaw. She's not taking us, Dad. I put a hand on his shoulder. No, son, she's not. The next day, I found out she was staying at the Maplewood Inn. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. I have a right to be part of their lives, she argued. You gave up that right when you walked away. Her voice dropped. I have nowhere else to go. I crossed my arms. That's not my problem. Her mask slipped. You think you can just cut me out? I tilted my head. I don't think. I know. Her lips curled into something cruel. We'll see about that. Days later, a letter arrived. Notice of custody petition. She wasn't fighting for the kids. She was fighting because she had nothing left. In court, she played the role of the reformed mother, but I had proof. 6 years of lavish vacations, parties, and a life without her children. The judge saw through it. Considering the overwhelming evidence, full custody will remain with the father. Noah and Ava clasped hands in the audience. Hope flickered in their eyes. Isabella stiffened. She knew she had lost. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt nothing but relief. The battle was over. My family was safe. I exhaled sharply, tension flooding out of me, but then the judge's next words sealed Isabella's fate. He leveled her with a stare. Due to the prolonged abandonment and emotional distress inflicted upon the children, I am denying the mother any visitation rights. Isabella's face crumpled. She shot up from her seat. No, no, Your Honor, please. But the gavel hit the desk. The decision was final. I turned to my kids. Noah was smiling. Ava was crying, not from sadness, but from relief. And in that moment, I knew she would never take them from me again. The aftermath. Isabella didn't say a word as she stormed out of the courtroom. She didn't look back, and I didn't follow her. I walked over to my kids, pulling them into a hug. It was over. We were free. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing. I would never let anyone take them from me again. The moment the gavel came down, I felt like I could finally breathe. The words still echoed in my head. Full custody remains with the father. Isabella's attempt to take my children had failed. For a moment, I thought I could allow myself to enjoy the victory. But the reality of what had just happened hit me all at once. The weight of the years I had spent raising my kids without her was now officially recognized. I turned to look at Noah and Ava. Their expressions transformed from anxious uncertainty to relief. Ava's tears weren't from pain anymore, but from the release of a burden she hadn't known how to carry. Noah had a small, genuine smile. I could see it in his eyes. He was finally free from the grip of fear, uncertainty, and grief. I pulled them into a hug, squeezing them tightly. You're safe, I whispered. We're safe. But even as I held them, close, I knew this wasn't over. Isabella wasn't the kind of woman who just walked away, especially not when she felt wronged. And as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw it, that flash of defiance in her eyes. She wasn't finished yet. Isabella's final move. I didn't know what she was planning, but I could feel it. That old, sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, the one I had carried for years when I was with her. The feeling that told me she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. She didn't leave the courtroom immediately. She stood there, frozen, her hands clasped tightly, jaw clenched. Her eyes weren't on the judge, me, or even the kids. She was staring off into space, already strategizing, thinking of ways to fight back. Finally, she stepped toward her lawyer, speaking in low, urgent tones. My lawyer saw it too. "She's not going to give up, Caleb," he said quietly. "You need to stay alert. She'll try something." I nodded, my eyes locked on Isabella as she whispered to her attorney. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what she was doing. The courtroom fallout, it. Wasn't long before Isabella's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we request a stay of execution on the custody decision. We believe further consideration is required in light of the circumstances." A jolt shot through me. A stay of execution? A legal maneuver to delay the ruling, a way to buy time for Isabella to gather resources and plan her next move. The judge raised a brow. "Your motion is noted, but I believe this case has been sufficiently decided. A stay is unnecessary." For a moment, it seemed like everything might just end there. But as the judge lifted his gavel, Isabella's lips tightened. She stood abruptly, her voice slicing through the silence. "This isn't over!" she shouted, her words sharp, defiant. The room went still. No one moved. I wanted to ignore her, to take my kids and leave. But I knew Isabella too well. She still had a way of making everything about her. Her lawyer stepped forward, his tone measured. "We ask that you reconsider, Your Honor. My client is willing to comply with any terms the court deems necessary to ensure she can be part of her children's lives." I clenched my fists. "Your Honor," I said, standing, "this woman abandoned our children for 6 years. She made her choice, and now she wants a second chance to play the role of mother. I refuse to let her manipulate this situation. She's had her chance." I turned directly to Isabella. "You don't get to break us apart again. Not after everything we've been through." For a second, something flickered in her expression. Vulnerability? Regret? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Her lawyer nodded. "We will move forward with the appeal." "Then go ahead," I shot back. "Drag it out. But you will not get what you want. This is over." The judge sighed, shuffling his papers. "The motion for reconsideration is denied. This court will not entertain further appeals." The words hit Isabella like a slap. Her face went pale, her lips trembling. I could see her mind working, scrambling for an option, but there was no turning back. She had lost. She stood motionless for a moment before turning away, her shoulders slumped. She walked out of the courtroom without a word. And I finally exhaled. Moving forward. Outside the courthouse, the crisp air felt fresher than it had in years. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. The weight I had carried, the worry, the fear, finally seemed to lift. I looked at Noah and Ava standing beside me. They were the only family I needed. Isabella had lost, and now she had no say in their lives. I turned to Noah, a small smile tugging at my lips. "You did good, kid." He smiled back. We did good. For the first time in years, I felt like we could truly move on. Life wouldn't be perfect. The scars Isabella left wouldn't fade overnight. But we were free. And that was all that mattered. Our story, the real one, was just beginning.